When I was around 20, a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora. They were different dreams, but for some reason, her distinct face and name always ended up in them. It got to the point where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name or find out how I was connected to her. After a few months, she stopped showing up and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a scumbag. Fast forward a few years later, Halloween 2009, I'm in the car with a friend, stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number. So I stopped the car, but no one answered. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. Second they get on the highway, some silver Civic loses control of the wheel and crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out the drivers of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't gotten that phone call. Called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity, rang 3 times and went to voicemail. Hi, you have reached Aurora. Please leave your name and number. Never had goosebumps like that in my life. Called it again the next day because I was that confused about the whole situation. Some woman answers, we get to talking, I tell her my entire story including the dreams I had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. Ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she is in fact the woman in my dreams. Check her Facebook. Holy shit, it's her. If that's not a glitch in the matrix, then I'm just batshit crazy. I have two stories that are just weird as fuck. Both of them are things I just would not believe if someone else told them to me. But I can swear with every fiber of my being that they happened as I write them here. The first happened a couple years ago. I can't remember the occasion, but my mother and I had gone to A&W for lunch and we were both sitting there eating our meals. We happened to be seated pretty close to the washroom doors, so I noticed everyone going in and out. First person to come out is this old man who is kind of hobbling along. He walked past and I looked at him and went on with my meal. Not 30 seconds later, another man comes out of the bathroom and at this point I get a little freaked out because I realize it's the exact same person. Same limp, clothing, face, everything. A couple minutes later, the same thing happens, except it's an old woman this time. She comes out, then 30 seconds later comes right out of the bathroom again. My mom took a look at me and said, "You look like you have seen a ghost." I just kind of stammered a bit, then wrote it off as me being crazy. The next story is more weird, in my opinion, and is the single strangest occurrence of my life. This happened when I was about 9 years old, but I can still remember it vividly. We were visiting family in Nevada with my dad, and they lived out in a very dry area in a fairly good sized trailer. A couple days in, I was playing outside with my cousin, pretty much just messing around in the dirt. At some point, I look up. Right next to the house is a field, I guess, surrounded by wire fence, probably originally for livestock. But anyway, there's this guy standing there. This is a good 300 or more feet away, so I cannot see him clearly at all. Cue the weird. As soon as I look at this guy, I have what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience. My body pretty much just went down into lockdown and I was no longer seeing through my eyes. And I wasn't just floating there on anything. I was in that man's body. Through his eyes, I could see two little shapes playing across the field. But I could feel that he saw the shapes as animals. And then I realized he was holding a fucking shotgun. After that, I regained my body and blurted out, "We have to go indoors," offering no explanation to my cousin, who I thought was nuts. I didn't tell anyone because I just didn't know how to express it to other people back then. I have only since told my brothers, but I don't think they believed me. Still freaks me out when I think about it today because it's the only time I have ever lost control of my body. It was almost like a dream, but the whole thing felt like it was happening in slow motion. I was at my girlfriend's at the time's parents' house and suddenly started feeling really queasy. She and I headed to the kitchen so I could get a glass of water, and we stood with me leaning back against the counter and her hugging me. She was saying I had gone incredibly pale, like almost white, and my lips were going a purpley color. She looked really scared. I then say to her, I can't feel my heart, and I check my pulse. Next thing I know, I'm in this place. I can't describe it except as an absence of absolute everything. There was a flow, but I couldn't see it. I was walking on nothing through nothing and surrounded by nothing. But I was there and it was there. There were other people in front of me, discernible face, clothes, and demeanors. I could see them and they could see me. Like properly see me, not just look at me, but actually see me. I could feel that they could. We were all there in complete silence, just really calm and silent, and in this space of nothingness, and then this bright bluish white light erupted from the distance and it called to us, silently beckoned us all towards it, so we started walking. I don't know why. We all just felt compelled as a single entity to head towards this light. It was beautiful, really fucking beautiful. I have never seen a light so pure or so beautiful since. I have never felt so calm and serene, and a strange happiness was flowing through me. I could feel myself smiling and feeling like all was right with everything in the world. Suddenly, I started being dragged backwards as if a fishing hook had just grasped my intestines from behind and was pulling me. I felt intense pain and there was a rushing sound. The light got more and more distant, as did the people, and there was what I can only describe as a blood curdling scream fading in from behind me. As this got louder, and as soon as the light faded, I woke up. I was on the floor of my girlfriend's kitchen. Her mother, a nurse, had just performed CPR on me, as I had been actually full on dead, no pulse, no breathing for about a minute. I felt like I was in that space for an eternity. The scream was my girlfriend crying hysterically at the thought of me being dead. I promptly threw up everywhere and felt instantly better. Even doctors at hospitals don't know what the fuck happened to me. I was discharged after a few hours of tests with a clean bill of health and felt completely fine. What's even stranger is, apparently, when I said I can't feel my heart, I passed out and fell onto my girlfriend who couldn't support me, and I fell, hitting my head off the counter and smashing into some empty bottles on the floor. Whilst I was out, I had apparently just stayed still but smiled until I stopped breathing. I was pale and my head and hands were freezing cold to the touch, but the rest of me was still warm. What's even stranger than that is that her pet cats freaked the literal fuck out when I was dead and all ran out of the house, howling into the night. One of them returned the next morning. The other two were found up a tree a few blocks away, meowing constantly. It happened 2 days after I turned 8. I live in Finland and we had just moved into town. Our apartment was in this cheap rental high rises 8th floor. My grandma had given me a few comic books as a present and I had been reading them ever since the party. Quite a stack, something like 10 to 15 individual comics. There was this one book, a Spider-Man comic. It wasn't about the usual Spidey, but something about Peter Parker's clone acting as Crimson Spider-Man. At least that's how it was translated to Finnish. I had just returned from school, so my parents were still at work, and I started reading this comic. At some page, the protagonist is crouching on a roof, jumps down and lands into the Spidey crouch, hands between his legs. Without thinking anything, I just laid down the comic, walked to our balcony, and climbed on the fence using a chair as a ladder. As I was sitting there, I see some man down and across the street. He saw me sitting there and started running towards our house. At this same moment, I had this really calm feeling taking over me. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and jumped down. When I jumped, I could hear the man scream, "No," followed by an abbreviation to "God help me." Then I just heard wind in my ear. Next thing I know, I am on the ground, crouching like Spider-Man. The man runs around some high bushes just when I stand up, stops dead on his tracks, and all color escapes his face. He just stood there with absolute terror in his eyes, completely silent and looking at me for a few seconds before backing away slowly without turning his face off of me before he is back at the corner where he turns away. I returned to the lower door only to find out I had left my key inside. So I just sat down and waited for my father to return from work, something like 1 hour. He was naturally surprised to find me there without my backpack. I told him what had happened, that I'm Spider-Man. When we were in the elevator, Dad thought it was just my imagination. When we returned inside, he saw my comic book laid open on the ground with the page featuring the jump and the balcony door left open. He took away that particular comic book and never allowed me on the balcony before I turned 12, and we moved to a bit better house, third floor. He also becomes disoriented every time I mention this to him and changes the subject quickly. Although he does admit he found me downstairs and the balcony door was open, I still remember this occasionally clear as day. I live in Chicago and it's a very big and beautiful city. And ironically, also the city in the Matrix. One of my hobbies on extremely nice days is to go downtown and follow odd looking people around to see what they are doing. I think this is called being a flâneur in French, and I have experienced some really weird things while following people that could be equated to Matrix glitches, even though I have never really had that thought before. The one that stands out in my mind as the most matrixy was a few summers ago. It was a Saturday and I was downtown with a parkour training group. The session was wrapping up at around 6 p.m. and everyone was getting ready to go home or somewhere else. I was sitting in a large tree we liked to climb and was looking down on an extremely odd man who had been watching us literally all day since 10 a.m. He was in his late 20s, I would assume, thin but muscular, and wore sunglasses and a bright green and pink short-sleeved collar shirt and cargo shorts. He just sat there for the entire 8 hours and didn't fucking move aside from maybe shift in his seat whenever he saw something that impressed him. At this point, only 4 people were left lingering. One man, his 2 female friends, and myself. The man got up, went over to the group of 3 and said something. It looked intense, and the 2 girls stood bolt upright while the one male threw his hands up in the air and had them drop to his sides quickly in a wild shrugging gesture. They were just out of earshot. I jumped down from my tree and stumbled, blotched the landing over to the trio. Apparently, the man had left, and I saw him walking briskly down the stairs towards Michigan Avenue, the main street of downtown Chicago. I was intent on following him, but I wanted to make sure he wasn't a crazy first. When I got to the remaining 3 youth, the 2 girls just stood there in the same position they were before, completely quiet. I asked about the man, to which the male replied, sounding rather offended, "What man? It's just me and these 2 here." For a brief moment, his face took on a strained look as if trying to remember the man, like he should remember the man, but the look vanished as quickly as the man had. When it was clear that he wasn't going to say anything on the matter, I turned and jogged down the stairs towards Michigan Avenue. I looked left and right and then left again and right again. I couldn't spot the guy. It had been less than a minute since he began walking and he was already out of sight. He could have crossed the street, but he would still have been waiting for a break in the traffic to do so. Other than that, the street was weirdly void of pedestrians. There was an open park to my right and rushing traffic to my left, and not a man in sight. Then I heard a scream from behind me and ran back to the park to see the 2 girls looming over the guy. I pushed them back and saw the male, who had slumped over, out cold and drooling a mixture of blood and spittle. He looked like he had just been beaten badly, just really had that snot knocked out of him. He was a pretty big guy, one of the most muscular guys I know. He could have taken 2 or 3 of anyone else in the park, no problem, but there he was down for the count. I asked the girls if they saw what happened. They said he was talking to himself and then just fell over. I told one to call an ambulance and continued to question the other one. I asked about the man again. They said they don't remember any man. I asked if they remember me coming over there. They didn't remember that either. Very odd. The ambulance arrived very shortly after and took the slumped over mess away on a stretcher as I sat there explaining in detail the events of the last 10 minutes to these girls who would just not believe me about the man in neon green and pink. I used to work at Speedway for over a year and such. I started smoking there, had a nervous breakdown there. Oh, by the way, it was a tiny Speedway right next to the ghetto. Anyway, one evening I was working by myself again because it was so tiny and I even closed by myself, and one of my usual customers had come in to ask for a pack of Marlboro Reds hundreds, the tall pack soft pack. Now, having worked for a while, my way of grabbing the cigarette packs from the little homes and tossing them onto the counter had become quite sophisticated. This particular pack I grabbed between my index and middle finger and swung my arm downward toward my side, still holding it like that. But as my arm came down and finished its curve, the pack left my fingers and vanished. There was no sound of the pack hitting the floor nor the wall. It did not fly backwards into the open security door that was behind me. The pack left my fingers and left this realm of reality. The customer stood there just as dumbfounded as I was. And the two of us stood in total silence before I slowly grabbed a second pack and re-attempted the said stunt just to hear what it would have sounded like. It made an odd tap sound, the kind of sound you would expect a pack of cigs to make if it hits something. So I sold him the pack, still a bit freaked out, and then proceeded to check the entire store for that lost pack. I even went across the store and checked behind racks and so forth, a distance that would be impossible for the pack to travel. Nothing. Though it was cool. I guess still kind of freaky. I have other similar stories about things like this, such as water cups that have vanished on me, chocolates, toys, childhood toys, that is. Now that I think about it, this sort of things happens to me a lot. Maybe I am a wormhole. When I was a teenager, I briefly lived with my estranged father, who I had never lived with before, as I was having difficulties with my mother. He had never been there for me as a child due to substance abuse, but he managed to clean up his act, get a job, and join AA. He loved antiquing and random crap gathering in general. One day, he found a painting on an old moonshiner's jug sitting on a tree stump. It was so plain that it was remarkable. I even wrote a short story about it, detailing the origins of how the jug wound up on the stump. Around 9 months into living with my father, he began drinking and using again. I left after he stole my corn collection to buy some drug or another. He had already sold a jug on a stump and everything else of even slight value to support his habit. Shortly enough, he found himself back in prison for ripping someone off to buy drugs and booze. It's been 12 years since then. My father got released from prison after serving 2 years and cleaned up his act again, for real this time. He had been clean and sober for 11 years at this point. Our relationship has never quite recovered, but it is not bad these days. Last summer I was looking through Craigslist and happened upon a funny listing. Painting of crockery in brown, $12. I clicked on it and sure as shit it's jug on a stump. I know it's my jug on a stump because it had really unique frame. Besides, no one would ever paint two of these hideous things. I emailed the poster but it was already sold. Hoped that whoever bought it would treat her right. Later that day, my father stopped over for an impromptu visit, something he rarely does. I can't help but notice the large painting he carries as he walks in. I shook my head in disbelief. He had seen the listing just before I did and purchased jug on a stump for me. In fifth grade, There was some rally to give prizes to the kids who sold the most stuff door to door. We were all in the gym and it was over. Being closest to the door on the left side of the gym, we were the first class to line up and start leaving. I am in the very back and I see my friend Wesley towards the front of the line. He hits his shoulder really hard on the middle part that separates the double doors. So the line files out, and then when I stepped outside, there's only my friend who was immediately in front of me and three girls. The five of us are entirely alone in the hallway. Our immediate thought is that they got ahead of us somehow, but that shouldn't really be possible because it's a long enough hallway. We go all the way back to class, but all the classes in fact were empty. One girl says, "Wasn't art next? Maybe they went straight to the art room." And so we went further, turned left, only to see the art room is empty. Someone then says, "Well, where did they go? Let's go back to the gym." The girls start to go back the way we had come, and my friend and I go the other way. It's a small school, and the hallways basically go around a big square. The art room is exactly opposite the gym, so going either way is the same distance. We reach the gym, and so do the girls, having not seen anyone, and seeing that all those classrooms were empty as well. So we go back into the gym. The gym is mostly empty now. A few adults are cleaning up. One is carrying the big banner that was high up on the gym wall. The very last class is filing out the other doors, which led into the same hallway. So I turn around and I am at the back of the line. My whole class is right in front of me, filing out the doors. At first, I think, wow, how did I miss that? I am confused. But then I see my friend Wesley, far ahead of me in the line as before, hit his shoulder really hard on the middle part between the double doors, and then I turn around again and see the adults before are just starting to clean up, and the big banner is still high up on the wall. I spoke with the other four. We all agreed that this happened and we had no way of explaining it. One of the girls was normally an extreme skeptic, the annoying type that doesn't believe even mundane things like I lived in the same state that Abe Lincoln once did. Even she was completely baffled and willing to believe something weird was going on. I never told anyone outside of that group, and as far as I know, no one else did. But for the next several days, it was all my friend and I could talk about each other. I have one that recently just happened to me. So I am taking my children to the park about a mile away from my house. My sister is having her baby shower there. Anyways, my daughter brought her phone with her. She has a bad habit of leaving it sitting around anywhere and she loses it. We are at the park for about 2 hours. I specifically remember seeing my daughter's phone on the wooden bench at the park. I opened, seen it was my daughter's. I yelled at her to come and get it and to be more careful with it. Well, about an hour later, we are loading up to go home. I get about halfway there and it hits me. I ask my daughter if she has her phone on her. She is looking everywhere and says, "Oh no, mom, I left it at the slides at the park." By then, I am pulling into my driveway. I immediately put the car in reverse and head back to the park. We searched for a good 30 minutes, couldn't find it, and my daughter was upset and I chalked it up to a lesson learned about leaving it everywhere. We get home. I walk back into my bedroom to go to my bathroom and I look in front of my TV and there is my daughter's phone sitting right there. I stared at it for a couple minutes trying to rack my brain around what just happened because no one came inside the house when we turned around in the driveway. I asked my sons if they brought it in. They said no. I asked my daughter if she brought it in. She said no, mom, I didn't. She looked freaked out too. We still can't explain how that happened. True story that still scares the shit out of me for reasons I don't understand. I was 15 at the time. Had a dream where I went to this arcade I would normally frequently go. I was with my buddy, and before walking outside to wait for our ride, we both buy sodas to go. We are squatting outside on the curb holding our drinks, looking into the parking lot. I finish my drink and for no reason I start putting my hand in my soda cup and continually throw ice out of the cup onto the ground. I pause for a second and say softly to myself, deja vu. As even in my dream I was thinking I had seen this somewhere before. I then lift my head up, look left and see two kids with skateboards riding, and then I wake up. About 10 days later, I am at the arcade again with my same buddy. Before walking out to wait for our ride, we both buy sodas. We go outside and sit on the curb in the same spot in my dream. I finish mine and again I start repeatedly throwing ice out of the cup. I pause and say softly to myself, deja vu. I freeze in pure terror after that, realizing I was repeating the same actions in my dream and recognizing that the deja vu I had in my dream was only deja vu because it's now happening 10 days later. I slowly crank my head to the left because I heard some noise, and to my further shock, I see two kids walking towards me with skateboards in their hands. I sprung to my feet and started flipping out with my buddy, still sitting and confused and asking me what was wrong. For what it's worth, purchasing a soda while leaving and throwing ice out of my cup aren't normal rituals I follow. In fact, it was the first time I could remember doing either of those two things. When I was in the university, I rented a large apartment with my three friends. One night, I saw this super vivid dream, which I remembered after waking up completely and in high detail. It was about our friends who had married recently and were on a honeymoon at that time. I explained the dream, including all the small details, to my roommate. The dream was an exchange in our living room where the newlywed wife of my friend was reading today's newspaper while we guys, five of us, discussed other stuff. She suddenly raised her head from the paper and asked if we had today's paper. I responded by laughing and asking if she was having so much fun at her honeymoon that she lost track of time. 2 weeks later, the couple had returned and were visiting us. At some point of the evening, we sat down to the sofa group, exactly to the same seats where I saw in the dream. I didn't remember my dream at that moment. A few minutes later, she started reading the paper while we talked. Then the situation started to escalate. The memory came back big time. She raised her head from the paper, asking for today's paper, and I lost control of my actions. In complete shock, I realized I could not do anything else than laugh and say those exact words my dream had me saying. At this point, my friend, who I explained the dream to earlier, had gone completely white on his face. I was sweating and gasping for air after exiting the robot mode, and everyone around the table was looking at us. The rest of the night, we discussed if time is a roamable dimension after all, and if there are wormholes through the multiverse to other points of time. That was my glitch in the matrix. I have terrible memory. Every single person I have met agrees with me. There are times when I can remember a very specific thing, but parts will be missing, sound, body parts, etc. But every night I have insanely vivid dreams, wake up and hallucinate, and mega sensitive to people's feeling before they tell me, then go about my day like nothing happened. I swear it's helped me with so many things. Take this for example. Guest comes to work where I work with her friend. Guest looks so tired, hunched over, and I'm getting very sad and unenthused vibe aura. Guest explains that they had been planning this trip since early on in the year, and a month ago to the day, her mother had died unexpectedly. She hasn't slept in a while, which I could tell. Her aches were palpable. I show her some stuff we have and let her know they will help her relax and sleep better. Her friend thanks me and they schedule some appointments. I kept feeling like this lady and I needed to speak, but couldn't pinpoint it. Lady breaks down out of nowhere, common for grieving. Anyways, they came back next day and I had this feeling the entire night before where I just knew that I had to show this lady I understood her inability to cope, the frustration and sadness and loneliness. So I go to the local grocery outlet and buy flowers. I was debating between roses and baby breath and decided to get a bouquet of both with lilies too. I wrote down my favorite quote too: ever thine, ever mine, ever ours. It encapsulates what love is to me, and I thought this lady would appreciate it. Anywho, lady comes out of treatment and lets me know she's headed back to her place early. I nod and hurry and give her the flowers and note before she could leave. She almost fell to the ground with emotion. Every single flower, down to the color, had been included in her mother's funeral wreath. And my middle name is Rose. Her mother's maiden name was Rose. My favorite flower is baby's breath. Her mother's favorite flower was baby's breath. And the quote, it was also her mother's favorite. She thanks me endlessly and tells me fate has the strangest way of working. Yeah, you ain't kidding, lady. At school in the third grade, when there was an announcement over the loudspeaker that there was a bomb threat, everyone thought it was a drill, but we had to walk to the evacuation spot anyway. The teachers looked worried but were trying to hide it. Some kids snuck off in the confusion and no one noticed except me. I didn't think it was some big deal because I thought it was just a drill. We waited at the evacuation spot for about half an hour and then the teachers were whispering frantically to each other. One of the teachers had a megaphone and started asking where two of the boys were, the ones who had snuck off. Nobody knew and I was too embarrassed to say that I saw them but hadn't told anyone. The teachers were trying to keep everyone calm, but their faces looked freaked out, and that's when we knew it wasn't a drill. Two of the teachers went off to look for the boys. I don't know how much time passed, but we heard the bomb go off. Both girls and boys were crying. Everyone was super scared. There were tons of emergency vehicles at the park, and no one found out until days afterward that the two boys had snuck back to the school. One had died, and the other was seriously injured to the point of needing to go to intensive care. He later needed a leg amputation. 2 days later, I saw the dead boy walking with his parents in the grocery store. He wasn't injured in any way. It was either an elaborate faked death for witness protection or something, or the matrix was buggy that year. I came home from a quiet gathering at a friend's house and reached into my pocket, felt my phone in there. Something felt different about it, so I take it out and examine it. It is an almost brand new version of my LG flip phone, which I had recently broken but was still using. This was in 2014, well after the age of smartphones, so flip phones aren't all that common or easy to come by, and this particular model is out of production. I looked through the contacts, tracked down the owner, and he says he lost that phone a year ago and doesn't want it. I talked to all of my friends, actually pretty much everyone I know, and none of them have any idea what I am talking about. Years went by and no one ever fessed up to putting that phone in my pocket. Another time I misplaced my keys in the same jacket pocket after walking in my room and tossing jacket in closet. I figured they fell out in my closet. It was a mess. I looked for a while but gave up and started using my spare instead. I frequently misplace things and they always turn up, so I wasn't really worried about it. 6 months go by. I decided to move my room into the basement and empty that closet completely in the process. No keys. 6 months after that, I am walking in from outside on the other side of the house through a room I use frequently and notice a set of keys on the middle of the fucking floor. Sure enough, it's the same set I lost a year before, except the part which used to be blue is now a shade of metallic brown, as if it had been in the sun forever or crossed dimensions or something. Again, talked to my roommates and everyone who had been at the house that week, even the sprinkler guy. No one had any idea.